right?
I'll say 3, you say 2, and then I say 1, and then you say Nintendo, and I'll say alert. Very simple.
We're gonna fuck this up. I know we are.
Zero chance. Zero
100.
chance.
Okay. So
All
you're
right.
gonna say 3 whenever you're ready.
3,
2,
1,
Nintendo.
alert. Wow, and we've been like a little sultry too.
One take.
One take. We're perfect. Well, welcome, folks, to episode 2 of Nintendo Alert, the podcast. Working title still, but Radmeyer, 49 views. You were talking about quitting your second job. YouTube has told me we have an estimated revenue of 6 cents USD. And so whenever you have a moment, DM me your full mailing address and social security number. I will send you a W-9 to fill out for the IRS, and we'll get that over to you just as soon as we have that information. Your cents. Is that exciting or what?
Yeah, I'm actually super excited, and I will just go ahead and proactively DM you my social security number too, just in case you need it while you're, filling out any employment forms or anything like that.
Excellent. No, that's perfect. That will only be used for Nintendo Alert purposes and nothing else. Well, thank you to the folks listening. If you're coming back from last week, excellent. If you're just here from this week, even better. I guess to get us started, Radmeyer, what have you been up to this week? Have you been playing any video games? If you have not, what have you been up to in your life? What's going on? It's been a full 7 days.
A full 7 days, and let me tell you, with me, it's always a full 7 days. I got a lot of shit going on. Most of it not super duper interesting, so I won't spend time on it. But in the gaming front, I have rediscovered a long lost love. I downloaded and reinstalled the Sims 4. And you know what? I know it's like not the most liked Sims, but I haven't played The Sims in a long time, and I've actually really been enjoying it. It's like a really good downtime game. You just throw it on in the background while you do something else. Check in on your Sim every once in a while. I've been having a lot of fun with it, actually. I haven't had a lot of time to play, but I did that. I got sick. I made some time for some IRL friends. I watched a movie with some people the other day, so it's been going good. It's been going about as good as life could go when you're also sick.
Yeah, well, that's one hell of a week. And so The Sims is interesting. I think a lot of people are really into The Sims. I never personally got into it. I got into some of the offshoots in the PC era, right? And so there was, I guess it has always been PC for The Sims, but the early PC era. And so thinking about like SimTown. So SimTown was like Sim City for kids in remedial English. And I say that with love because I loved SimTown, but there were like 3 options. There was no complexity to it whatsoever, but you could like build an arcade next to a police station. And the police station looked like a big set of handcuffs, right? And so for me, that was the game. And the soundtrack, actually a little bit of a bop. And then I also had a whole compilation of, you had SimTown, then there was Sim Ant was one of them. Sim Safari was another one of them. The strangest Sim games, but it was everything Maxis did before I think they landed on SimCity and The Sims being the top tier products. But there was a whole bunch of weird stuff in there.
I've never heard of some of those genuinely, and I was a SimCity person. Like, I liked SimCity, but what I really enjoyed was like the original Sims, like for the PC, whatever the first one was. And I really haven't played it since then. My sister really liked it. I have friends that really like it, and my kids like it. I just never bothered. But I just looking for something to do one day, and I was like, I have The Sims and it's free. I'm gonna try it again. And
Yeah.
I kind of fucked with it. What about you? How was your week? I do want to get back into like you said Sim Ants, and I have so many questions, but this is not a Sim podcast. So
No, that's okay. I think honestly, the more time we spend discussing Sim Ant, the better. I think that's what's going to drive our viewership. I think there's a group of what they call it, like the unheard, the silent majority, right? It's what they talk about. It's the silent majority is people who are waiting for Sim Ant 2. So that's one of the games that there were many games like this where as a kid, I just could not figure out how to start them. Like I'll boot up an Atari game, for example. I'll like go through and try to play some Atari title, and I just don't know how to get the game to function, right? It's like you have the stick and you have the button, but I just don't know how to get the game to start. And that was absolutely my experience with Sim Ant. I remember being like a child and having no idea where to go with it. I will say that though that it's worth exploring if you can get it running. Sim Safari and Sim Town are just like things to experience. Sim Safari was like you could put like giraffes, right? Like you're building a little safari park. Oh my gosh, what fun. And I had that whole setup there back in the day. It was like the Sim Pack. It was like, what's it called? I think Maxis was the company at the time. I want to
Yeah,
say that was,
Maxis is the company. Yes.
yeah. And so there's a whole Maxis party pack of games, and you got an individual CD round for each. The golden era, I feel like, of weird shovelware pack-in games.
Potential future stream, maybe.
I think so. Sturkey in chat says no surprise there, but I played Sim Farm, which makes sense. Sturkey being a known farmer.
Did you or the chat ever fuck with like Roller Coaster Tycoon or Zoo Tycoon or any of those like second wave of these sim type games?
No, I never really got too into Roller Coaster Tycoon, and I think that's because we weren't really ever an amusement park family. And so the idea of a roller coaster to me was like, oh, I'll never do that. I think from a young age, I was like, no, pass, right? I think some people start strong loving roller coasters. But for me, I've always just had the sense that like I should not be moving like that, right? And so I think my interest in Roller Coaster Tycoon has been pretty minimal as a result because it's like I just, don't care, right? So no. But are you into Roller Coaster Tycoon?
Oh man, I was literally waiting for you to ask the moment that I asked the question because God was I. God was I. I played so much Roller Coaster Tycoon and by extension Zoo Tycoon. And as a strong Jurassic Park kid, right? The
Mm.
only tattoo I currently have, guys, is a giant T Rex skull. Um, when they added the expansion to Zoo Tycoon that lets you add dinosaurs, I don't think I did anything else for that entire week. I just made Jurassic Park. That's all I did. So yeah, I those games and me we're like a hand in a glove. We go way back, and they have a lot to do with who I am as a person now.
Yeah, I'm struggling to think of ways that who you are as a person right now could potentially be related to keeping a park full of dinosaurs, but I'm going to give you that.
I have children. It's the same thing basically.
There you go. Life finds a way. So, to answer on my end, what I've been up to, I've just been playing Paper Mario. That's it. Paper Mario Thousand Year Door re-release comes out later this week on the 23rd. The I didn't realize until some of the hype stuff has started coming out, some of the footage and the trailers and that sort of thing, that this remaster looks insanely good. Like it looks unbelievable. I don't love I don't love exactly how they've kind of like made Mario look more like the modern Paper Mario because I think the older one has a little more charm. It's impossible to describe. There's just the design difference, but I think like the game overall looks incredible, and it's about as good as you could ever expect a Paper Mario game to look. And Thousand Year Door, of course, goated GameCube title, something that I think if you've never played, this is going to be a great way to play it. And if you have played it, it's going to be great to play it again. And so this comes out later this week. I thought, you know what? I'll start Paper Mario for N64 on the virtual console, see how far I can get, and see if I can't beat that before this game comes out. I don't know that I'm going to actually get through the N64 one, but just sort of dipping my feet back into that world that I haven't really played since like I was like a child, I think has been a lot of fun. And I'm excited to see what other sort of memories unlock as I go. But from like the music and some of the boss fight mechanics and that sort of thing, like the whole game has been a real stroll down memory lane, but like an aggressive one where it's like just all of these memories come back at once. Because I haven't played it probably 20 years. And so it's been a delight, frankly. But that's sort of the big thing that I've been up to this week, in addition to just like work stuff and that sort of thing. But yeah, so that's that.
I Yeah, and I'm very excited for you. And I haven't been paying much attention to the remake, but Thousand Year Door is Paper Mario in general. I love all the games. I think my least favorite is the most recent one, and I feel like we touched on this a little bit last week, so I won't go into it in detail. But I think Thousand Year Door might be my favorite GameCube game, like full stop.
Oh wow.
I'm sure I'll think of another one over the course of this podcast, but Thousand Year Door is very good, like very good.
Yeah, I mean top tier for sure. I think that realistically, if you're looking at games that came out for the GameCube, you'd struggle to find something that's better or frankly that has aged better than Thousand Year Door. The GameCube I think was GameCube also just one of those consoles that I think at the time was sort of panned, and for all the reasons that Nintendo consoles are panned, right? They're like it's underpowered, it's limited in terms of its capacity because it's got the smaller discs, right? Like there were people had a number of complaints about the GameCube when it was out, and I'm sort of learning as I get older that the people who are my age now, when I was experiencing these things growing up, had a lot of beef about stuff that was like objectively very good, if that makes any sense. And the thing that I've thought about is the Star Wars prequels, right? The Star Wars prequels, I think, are a big example of sort of like Gen X slash older millennials having beef with something that younger millennials and Gen Z have really come to love and adore. Creed, I think, is another one. So Creed is another one. We won't get too far down this rabbit hole, but I think that Creed is a thing that was widely accepted to be, oh, Creed is a bad band. But now you have a lot of people who start listening to it ironically and then suddenly find themselves thinking, maybe this isn't like objectively bad, right? Maybe this isn't the scourge of the earth. And so I take umbrage with a lot of the sort of hot takes that came out of the 2000s and the late 90s that are sort of like accepted to be common knowledge, right? And so this idea that the GameCube wasn't a successful console or wasn't as good as the PS2 or the basic Xbox, I sort of dispute it deep in my core. And then also I think we'll probably wind up with some degree of a similar renaissance for the Wii U down the road, but we'll have to cross that bridge when we get to it. But
Yeah, I will say for me, the Wii U doesn't hold any nostalgia. The GameCube definitely has some nostalgia, and it's definitely underpowered as Nintendo consoles tend to be compared to the other consoles of that generation. But think about how many games from the GameCube like occupy like a pretty big mental space and like just the gaming zeitgeist of the time. Like if you lived through it, you will remember games like Pikmin. Like they're still making Pikmin. The first one came out on the GameCube. That was really fun. Beautiful Joe. Everybody loved Beautiful Joe. We already talked about Paper Mario. Double Dash. Oh my God, Double Dash was such a good game. They did all the Rogue Squadron games on GameCube. What was the Mario? Was it Sunshine? Was that the Mario one for the GameCube?
yeah, so real quick, I do want to acknowledge and thank Still Do for the raid. If you're listening to the podcast and you're like, why did I just hear here's Johnny from The Shining? It's because we got raided. But yes, it was Mario Sunshine and the Rogue Squadron games I completely blanked on. I forgot that they existed. I'm remembering I think we had Rogue Squadron 3 and you can unlock the original Star Wars arcade with the vector graphics.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Unbelievable. I'll need to put that in an emulator or something and play that game again because it's
Rogue
just so much
Squadron.
fun. Yeah.
Oh yes, so fun, so fun. And I actually had it for the PC before they did the GameCube ports, and I don't even remember if they were the same game. In my head, they're just ports, but they might have been brand new games. But I we had like a joystick, like the ones that they sell, like that simulate you flying a plane. Like I didn't even play with a mouse. Like I actually used like a plane joystick to play Rogue Squadron, and it was top tier, dude. I can't even explain the feeling.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, the GameCube, I mean, honestly, we could do. I was talking to Radmeyer offline about talking about the conversation about Miyamoto that we had started last pod. And I was like, we need to set aside time to do an individual pod for that because I feel like we could talk for hours about that. And I feel like the GameCube is also one of those things that 100,000 titles. One title that I've actually recently started thinking about in the GameCube that segues nicely into our next point here is Mario Party. There's a on eBay I found an old Mario Party poster from Nintendo Power magazine, and it says Mario for president, and it's made to look like a campaign ad. And I was like, I need that. Like, that's my personality. So I
That's
purchased
good.
it. But in the process, sort of reflecting on Mario Party and how good of a game that was, and how I think sort of important that's been in my life in a weird way. We used to play Mario Party a lot growing up with our parents. It's one of our favorite sort of like party games. I think a lot of families have sort of experience playing Monopoly together or board games. And interestingly, my family was apparently super cool, and so we played Mario Party for the N64, the first one. And so I have a lot of love for that game, but I saw on Twitter the other day that a Nintendo leaker named Midori says that there is a Nintendo game codenamed Banquet under development from a dev named ND Cube, and that ND Cube had apparently developed Mario Party Superstars, Super Mario Party, and Mario Party 9, as well as some of the other Mario Party titles. And so it sounds like, at least within the first year or two of the Switch 2 being out, whenever that may be, we could see a Mario Party title, which is very exciting because, as you know, Mario Party Superstars, or whatever it was, the compilation one, had so much promise and got it right because it just reused maps from old games, but they only gave us like 5 maps. And so I don't know. I just hope that they learned some good lessons from that, because I think Super Mario Party was a little bit bad. But Mario Party Superstars shows that they can still do it, but they just need to add more maps. So I guess, like, what are your thoughts on Mario Party as it stands? Do you have any Mario Party memories? How many times can I say Mario Party in 3 minutes?
Mario Party, brother. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I played Mario Party with my parents. We played like Mario Golf and Mario Tennis and stuff too, just to switch it up. We played like any Mario game that could reasonably be multiplayer, we would try to play together. Party was one that I always enjoyed more with my friends because they would be absolute bastards in a way that my parents just could not be. And obviously, everybody remembers the Nintendo 64 one where you're like furiously rotating the joystick in a way that probably broke many controllers and definitely hurt hands, because I know Nintendo has a disclaimer in the new one to not do that. But yeah, I mean, yeah, even in college, we were still like turning Mario Party into like a drinking game. So like this is it's stayed with me for a long time, and I share a lot of your sentiments about Mario Party Superstars. I feel like the formula was there with Mario Kart and Smash Brothers. Like, just give us a shitload of Mario Party, and it felt like they had the roadmap for it, and then just kind of didn't follow through all the way. Like, the roster wasn't even particularly large. They only gave us like 4 or 5 maps. What is there is fun, genuinely, but it just didn't feel like substantial in the way that, and I think it kind of felt like that specifically because Smash Ultimate was so big and Mario Kart 8 has been around for like 14 years or whatever. um I just think it didn't feel as big as it could have. What about you? What would you like to see, like, going forward for Mario Party?
I mean, I think, to be honest, as you were saying that, I had the thought, like, if I'm Nintendo and I'm trying to pad out the Nintendo Switch until the Nintendo Switch 2 comes out, in this June Nintendo Direct, if I love Suborbital and I want to make him happy, which is obviously is and should be the guiding principles that move Nintendo's decision making process, right? I am I'm releasing more maps for Mario Party Superstars. There's no reason not to, frankly, because they've got the thing, right? It's like if they had a car that they could add gasoline and they just chose not to, and they just let it sit in the parking lot. It's like, you can go and get gas very easily and drive that car for miles. And so it's just, I hope that they add more before the end of the Switch, or that they, add some for Switch 2 or whatever, that, like, because it's not so much that I need something new from Mario Party. And this is maybe me being 100 years old, right? But I don't feel like I need something new from Mario Party. I feel like I just need them to do what they always did with it. And so if that means that they just make every map from, the legacy titles available, or they add more maps from 1, 2, 3, like those classics that everybody loves, that could save Mario Party Superstars as a game, because I feel like I've been, like you said, disappointed by the lack of stuff that's in there. And so, in terms of what could come next for it, like, what do I hope they do next? I sort of just hope that they expand on it. I don't know that they need to get super fancy. I think what they've done they could make the online multiplayer a little better, because it's very classic Nintendo online multiplayer. But think that there are things that they could do to sort of just improve it generally from a user experience point of view. But I don't know. Like, and that's the problem is I just think that they have it right, right? Like the whole fun of the game is that sort of like anything goes. People can be anywhere from like very naive classic board game players who are just going to play the game to like openly lying and like politicking to their friends, right? Like the game has so much depth depending on how like toxic your friend group is, which sounds hilarious. But I literally will be playing Mario Party with people and I'll be like, listen, if you don't steal my star, what we can do is we can each steal a star from so and so, and that'll put us at better place. You know what I mean? And then just straight up lie to people's faces. I'm a sociopath when I play Mario Party.
Yeah,
That's just how it is.
Survivor style. You make alliances.
Yeah, you make alliances, and people don't expect that. And so I played with my family right after this Christmas, and it was like talking to my brother, and I'm like, listen, I know you think that you want to steal my star because it's funny. I'm suggesting you don't do that. I think that we can do more together than we can apart. And you just slowly talk them into doing it. And it's so much fun, but it's sort of a vehicle for those moments like Mario Kart can be, where you are, you know, together with friends and having a good time. And so I don't know that they need to change the formula. I think adding more mini games is always a plus, right? Like give us new fun mini games. If there's a gimmick to the Switch 2, give us something that reflects that, right? Give us something that utilizes that and kind of teaches people how to get comfortable with that. I know on the Switch one, the Super Mario Party, they had I'll never forget playing it. You use the motion controls on the Switch to cook a steak, and it's like a cube of steak, and you just like rotate to flip the steak over. And I just remember thinking that was the most fun, bizarre little mini game you could play, right? And so they just need to do something that embraces whatever gimmick it is they have, but also stays true to and incorporates some of the legacy maps, because I think they've teased us with this shit, right? The fact that I could play the Yoshi map and hear that music again on like a modern console and it looked so good was incredible. Now it's just like, give us more of the maps. Let me play on Eternal Star, right? Bowser's Magma Mountain, the Mario one where you're in the clouds. Like those are crazy fun maps. What are we doing? I'm mad now. I'm now angry. Anyway, Radmire, calm me down. Tell me something.
Here's my thing, right? I don't know that there's any precedent for Mario Party DLC of any variety. And ND Cube, the people that are making the new one allegedly, made Superstars. They made Super. So if they're already working on the next one, I think it's unlikely that we see anything for Superstars. And I think that's a shame because there's so many characters that could have been included, that should be included. Like, why not just give us a huge roster? Why not add, like Toad, Boo, Koopa Kid, Koopa Troopa, like people that have appeared in other Mario Party games that just aren't in this one inexplicably, like Diddy Kong, Donkey Kong, they were in some of the handheld ones. Just give us tons of people. And I have complete faith that Nintendo will continue making good mini games. I think they're good at that. I don't have any issue with that, but it's just like Super Mario Party came out in 2018 and Superstars came out in 2021. So they're giving us something new about every 3 years from ND Cube, and it just feels like we're about at that point. So I think it's unlikely that they do anything additional with the game, and I think that's a huge missed opportunity. I agree with you. It feels like all brakes, no gas, instead of the other way around. But personally, I don't know. Like, I feel like more Mario Party would have been fine for that moment. But I don't think that you can just now, after, Mario Party 9 wasn't good. I don't remember 10 very well. 10 wasn't good either. And then Super and Superstars were both fun, but like not blow me away good. I would like to see them do something a little different. Like, keep the standard game mode or whatever, but like, the one thing that I think is missing from Mario Party as like a board game is like your character choice doesn't really matter a whole lot. Like in other Mario games, when you pick characters, like tangible things change. Like in Smash, sure, they all have basically the same moves, but the move sets are different. They all have different smashes and different double jumps and whatever. In tennis and in strikers, like picking different characters, they're good at different things. But in Mario Party, the characters are just reskinned. Like, that's it. They're just the characters. Why not give like each character its own flavor? Why not like make character choice matter? Make the roster a little bigger. Why not push Mario Party in like a new direction? If you want it to be a board game, which it's a cool little fantasy. I have no problem with that, but there's so many like more interesting actual board games out there, and I feel like Mario Party has been content for a long time to just kind of deliver the same basic thing with new mini games, and it's never bad. But I think at some point, and maybe already we're at that point, you're going to see diminishing returns because I'm just not particularly. I don't think Mario Party is moving a console at this point. Like, Mario Party's fine. I'll play it and I'll enjoy it, but I'm not like excited about Mario Party, if that makes sense. And I kind of touched on that last week. Like, where do we go from here? And I think they need to do something different. And I have other ideas, but that was the first one that popped into my head. Like, I just think add a different game mode that maybe gives us a different variety of board game. Like we do a worker placement game or something different. There's more to do in that space. And I feel like this game in particular is one that Nintendo seems content to just kind of sit on their laurels and take whatever the next release is and make whatever they're going to make because it's a guaranteed like, mid seller.
But you might be interested to try out it. And I've been kind of exploring this recently. This game called, I think it's Fortune City for the Wii. Fortune City for the Wii is developed by Square Enix, but it is like Mario Party, but different, if that makes sense. So it's Mario characters. It's got some Square Enix characters that I don't know I think it's like Monster Hunter or something. It's sort of like a weird mashup, and there's like a stock market dynamic involved, and it's interesting. But you should look into that just for curiosity, because I'm actually looking into picking up a copy to play on stream one of these days. But that's when you were saying about complicating the game a bit. It reminded me, and has sort of further instilled in me that I would like to try that game. However, I disagree with you on the character selection thing. I understand where you're coming from, but I think that I'm tired of metas. Okay, I'm tired of lobbies full of people all using Waluigi Wiggler, right? Or whatever the meta of any game is. I'm tired of it, and I will not stand for it. Being dramatic, of course. But
I hear you.
I think that the randomness of the game and the sort of the when you play Mario Party, you're just thrown into it, right? It starts with the dice roll to decide the order of turns, and it only gets worse from there. And so the moment that there's strategy, because there's strategy and there's like politics and there's sort of like off-screen stuff that plays into it. But I think that the game introducing strategy is like not my favorite. It's just because I feel like it's the purest form of, you can play Mario Party with somebody and it can be their first time playing and they can win the game, right? And I think that that's something that's missing from a lot of games that are sort of party games these days, is that like, even something like Jackbox, right? Is there's just an understanding that certain jokes are going to play well. And like, you know what I mean? Like, if you're playing competitively, I think to some extent there is an advantage to having played before, but just the pureness of Mario Party being very like random chance, even down to like, chance time and like the stars at the end, that it's just like, Koopa Troopa just decided that whoever's in, fourth place is going to win. And so everything that happens is going to make that happen, like, is so funny to me. And I feel like that's an important part of the character of the game, is that you can credibly play the best game of Mario Party. You can make no incorrect moves, but the game just hates you and has no regard for strategy of any kind, that you can still wind up coming from like first place to fourth place in the last two turns because somebody landed on the wrong space or whatever. And so I think that that's sort of something that I value in the game. But I understand where you're coming from, that like if you want to grow the game in a meaningful way, yeah, you would want to incorporate some strategy. But my hot take is leave it exactly alone. Give me everything. Just give me more of it, right? Just give me, because I want to play more Mario Superstars. I would, but there's just only a few maps to play, right? And so after a while, you just run out of game to play. So that's my only hot take on it.
My hot take is I'm already bored of it. I'm already bored of it, and I don't know that them adding more characters or boards is really going to change that.
That's fair. That's fair. Well, the good news is Mario Party is just one of many games that exists in the universe, which is a great segue to. It's not a great segue to. It's a very ham-handed, forced segue to the big topic for today. And I want to make sure we get to this because I think this is where it's going to be really interesting, open-ended discussion here. But Chris Pratt, Garfield himself, came out the other day talking about, let's see, when was this? This was, well, not the other day. It was pretty recently, though. But he was talking about the Nintendo Cinematic Universe and how the Legend of Zelda movie is sort of the first step towards that beyond, obviously Mario movie 2. And so just to sum it up for people, we know that the Super Mario Bros. Movie came out in, what was it, April of 2023. And then we have the Mario Brothers 2 movie that's been announced for 2026. And now we have this Sony Motion Pictures making a Zelda film, a Legend of Zelda film. And so recently there was a story that dropped about this that said that there was an interview where this guy Rothma from Sony Pictures said that the Zelda film was one of their big IP movies and that he said it was going to be huge for them, massive, and then talks about Miyamoto himself being directly involved in it in like very hands-on in such a big way. But you're thinking about, the backlog of IP that Nintendo has. You're thinking about the number of characters we had in Super Smash Bros., right? And it sort of just boggles the mind when you think about the fact that the actors involved in the Mario movie are saying, we think that there's going to long-term be a Nintendo Cinematic Universe, whether or not it's exactly like Marvel's, where everything interweaves and they all come together. I think and we'll get into this, but I think there's a lot of potential for that. But I think just overall, there's so many movies we could be seeing here in the next few years, at least announced, right? And I'm wondering what your thoughts are and sort of which Nintendo IPs you most want to see adapted to movies. Though I think Mario and Zelda are a pretty strong start. Do you have any other thoughts that Nintendo should be getting a handle on here?
Outside of those two, I spoke at length about Metroid last week, and I'm not even a huge Metroid person, but I do think that there's something there. There's, it's got a strong female lead. There's a compelling story. It feels like Alien mixed with Jaws, mixed with, I don't know, something else, and I feel like you could do something interesting there. I do feel like there's a lot happening different in the Nintendo Cinematic Universe or whatever. Like some of those titles are pretty tonally different, like even from title to title. Like Zelda has games that feel goofy, like they might fit with Mario, but then they have games like Majora's Mask that are like an exploration of childhood and like perhaps mental illness, and it's like it's a very heavy game. like there's a lot happening there. So I would be super duper excited for a Zelda movie. I would be super duper excited to see any Nintendo thing turned into a movie. I have questions about how they would do it, particularly for Zelda, where Link is one of the main characters and he doesn't really talk. So they'd have to, I don't want Link to not talk for the whole movie. So they would just have to make sure that they did a really stellar job with the voice actor, with the script, whatever. But where I would struggle is how those characters then come together if they want to do something Avengers style. I absolutely don't think they have to. I think that's completely unnecessary. But I would struggle to see like how something like Samus ends up with Mario, and it doesn't feel like tonally jarring, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Is that if you are doing something that kind of is true to the spirit of, let's say, a Metroid, right? Or even thinking about how fun and lighthearted and upbeat the Mario movie was and that art style, right? And then if you're having a live action Legend of Zelda movie, I think that the sort of the mashing of worlds could be complicated. I think the question becomes like, does Nintendo care? And also just like, is that in Nintendo's best interest or something they're even exploring? My gut says there is a way to do it. And I think a lot of people have talked about it or hypothesized that this could be a move that they make. It's not necessarily one that they are, but something that could be interesting is individually introducing all of these different IPs as movies, right? And then sort of like not even in like a super good or like impressive way weave the stories together, but just plant evidence that this all happens in the same place, right? And then Smash Bros is like the world in which they exist together, right? And when you think about it, the Mario movie had a lot of sort of IP crossover, right? And so there's like Punch Out references, Donkey Kong's in there, right? There's the line from Princess Peach where she says that there's a lot of galaxies out there, right? That sort of alludes to something bigger. Obviously, it's a pun for Mario Galaxy. It's a play to that. But I think that they've sort of left the door open that all of these things are happening in the same world, right? And it's all sort of based on Earth because in the Mario movie starts in New York, and then it sort of gradually transforms into Mushroom Kingdom when they jump into the pipe. And so the implication is that these more Nintendo game specific worlds exist within sort of the confines of an Earth that exists. And so my thought process is it's possible that maybe what they do is sort of everything's based on that starting point of Earth, right? Or at least is accessible from that. And maybe that's the place where Super Smash Brothers exists, because Super Smash Brothers is, of course, canonically like the master hand brings all the pieces together. And so I think that's the most natural way that you could merge them together. I think the styling, like blending the styles, is sort of the big question there. But you think about something like an old school Jimmy Timmy Power Hour, right? The way that they did that was to say, "Oh, the styles are different now. Deal with it," right? And so I think depending on how artistic they're trying to be, which I don't know that they are, but I think that a Super Smash Brothers movie would, if the Mario movie sold, $1 billion or whatever at the box office, a Smash Brothers movie that was like gradually hinted at over the course of a few different Nintendo movies, I think it would break the theater system. Like there would be that would be the sort of Avengers style renaissance that pop culture needs. I think it could burn people out, but I just can't imagine a world in which the Smash Brothers movie isn't like a huge fucking deal.
If we get there, I don't necessarily disagree, but I think just like the early Avengers, it relies on Nintendo getting all of the individual movies right. Right? Like and do you actually think that there's a compelling script that can be made where a hand is the bad guy, right? Like a hand is the ultimate bad guy of all these characters. I think that we need to brainstorm a better villain, a better intent for bringing all these pieces together. And when I still just struggle with the tone shift, not like the art style shift, not any of that, but there is like a pretty big tonal shift between a lot of these characters, and I think they could make that work. But like Marvel kind of made it work by slowly introducing things into the universe and kind of playing within the rules that had already been established and subverting them in interesting ways and adding to them in interesting ways so that none of it felt weird by the time we got to Infinity War. And so I think if Nintendo wanted to go that route, they would have to do something similar. They would, make a really solid standalone movie and slowly sow the seeds of the connective tissue. And I can't see it actually being Master Hand. That would like I would love to see like a reference to Master Hand as like for those OG smashers out there, but I can't see that actually being the antagonist of a huge
No,
Nintendo venture.
well, not literally. I think it would have to be some sort of representation of Master. And I think Master Hand is, in a lot of ways, it's a symbol, right? It's a symbol for the
Hand of capitalism.
well, not, I don't know about the hand of capitalism, but it well could be in the movie, right? Because in the game, it's like they're being sort of, at least the conceit that I've always gotten from it is that in the opening for the Nintendo 64 game, they're toys, right? And the hand comes in and is sort of making them fight each other, right? And then the final boss is sort of poetically the hand that is controlling you, right? And so there's some creative way that you can very masterfully make a point. I don't know what that point is. I'm not prepared to make that point right now, but that's like there's something there. And I think you're right that there would have to be a bridging, or there would have to be well in advance some thought process into there would have to be some thought process into like how do you start the movie, or how do you write the movies to begin with the correct tone, right? How do you get the tone right from the beginning so that way they can all merge together, which I'm guessing if they're going to do it, they've already put some thought into this. But I think it all comes down to there's so much incredibly valuable Nintendo IP that has the potential to be, you know, The Legend of Zelda, for example, could be, you could tell a number of stories. You could tell the stories that already exist in terms of Wind Waker, in terms of,
Hmm.
you know,
Hmm.
Majora's Mask, like all of the great Legend of Zelda stories you can tell in whatever, whether they're movies or a series, like you just can't fuck it up, right? That's the thing. And so with the Mario movie, they're one for, well, they're a few for, they're one for a few if we're being, if we're remembering the past. But for this current iteration of Nintendo movies, they're one for one. And so, you know, if the second one's good and they introduce Yoshi and they start to broaden the Mario universe, and then if the Zelda movie, which is going to be live action, if that's
Yeah.
good, then I don't know.
I will say I do just I disagree with you in a certain sense that Mario makes sense to me, and I do think like something like Sonic the Hedgehog doing pretty well, all things considered, even if it's not like blowing people away. I think that that all speaks well for Nintendo's ability to kind of enter the space and be okay. But I think like Mario's like Mickey Mouse. Like everybody knows Mario. Everybody's mom knows Mario. Everyone's grandma knows Mario. But I don't know that the deeper Nintendo backlog, and it sounds weird to say like Legend of Zelda is like deep Nintendo backlog, but like literally once you get out of Mario, does the broader general public care? Like, do they actually care to see like a Legend of Zelda movie or a Metroid movie or even a Donkey Kong movie?
I
Like, does it feel like Battleship the movie, or like, do people actually care about it?
Dude, I think that is gonna be maybe the most ages like milk thing you've ever seen. Which is like
It might be. It
said
might
with
be.
respect and said with love. But I just think it's the Zelda movie is gonna be fucking bananas. Like I think Zelda's if Mario and Zelda are the big two, I can definitely concede that. I think yes, if you get to some of the lower down, if you get to like a Metroid, right? I think you speak glowingly of Metroid. I think the sales numbers reality is that Metroid sells well for a video game, but Metroid is one of Metroid is below Kirby. Metroid is below
Yes.
99%
Yeah.
of Nintendo properties. And so a
Yeah.
Metroid game might, or a Metroid movie might sort of struggle, but I think that the key is reintroducing a lot of these things. Or not necessarily reintroducing them, but it's the strategy behind how you bring these things to bring these things to market. Like
A hundred percent.
The Mario game, as long as they didn't release it in the Wii U era, was gonna be huge, right? But the Zelda game, they've just, you know, on the heels of Tears of the Kingdom, which was one of the biggest games of all time, right? Was one of the most widely acclaimed video games ever made. They're announcing that they're going to do this movie. They're being very intentional about these movies. And so I think if they were to incorporate more IP, they could certainly, you know, Metroid Prime 4, for example, is any day now, right? It could come out tomorrow at this point. It's been in the works for so long. If that game comes out and does, you know, and does numbers, then certainly that would sort of prime the pot for a Metroid release. I don't know if it's going to be as big or successful, and they don't necessarily have to be, right? You think about something like an Ant-Man or like the original Hulk movie or whatever.
Correct. Yeah.
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 Like there can be less impactful pieces, but I think
It,
that all of them coming together would be the crazy part. You know,
it's all about execution, and I 100% agree with you. Nintendo. If Nintendo wants to get this off the ground, it's all about how they execute because they really only have a couple top tier people, and I think Mario's it really. Honestly, if I'm being honest, I like Legend of Zelda is big in the gaming community, but does Legend of Zelda like do move interest outside of that? And I honestly I don't know that it does. Being frank, and I love Legend of Zelda, but this very well could age like milk. And if Nintendo like puts out really good movies, people will obviously get invested because people are going to see Ant-Man, and they probably wouldn't have done that if Marvel hadn't done a good job prior to Ant-Man. So like, there's a world in which it's fine, and my comments completely age like milk. But I just think in a vacuum, outside of Mario, do people care about seeing motion pictures about these characters? Like, have these characters penetrated outside of the gaming sphere? And I'm just not convinced that they have.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are definitely a lot of Nintendo IPs for which that is the case. I think if you were to just say to the average person, do you give a shit about do you give a shit about Samus or Star Fox, right? The answer would probably be like, who are those people? So just to like the average person on the street. I think that there's definitely like a base of interest that's going to come from sort of Nintendo old heads. But you got to think if Metroid Dread sold 20 million, if Metroid Dread sold 20 million copies, right? Then how many movie tickets does that sell? And I think you can do the math out that way and you can kind of get a sense for what it could gross, right? Because people are going to spend $60 to play the game. I would guess they're going to pay, $10 to see the movie, $15 to spend to see the movie. And so you can kind of see the path. I guess I don't know enough about movies to have a sense for what the what a viable market is. But I think that starting with the sales of the game and assuming that if you played the game, if you paid that much to play the game, you might go to the movie theater and watch it. It's probably pretty similar. And I guess how many movie tickets yields how much money, all sort of things to take into account. But I think it's just when it comes to movies, if you look at any given week at the movie theater, the John Krasinski movie, if right, that movie came out, it made it up, right? It's about imaginary friends. Like I'm sure there is some contingent of people who are into John Krasinski, but like people are willing to discover new stuff, right? And I think is as long as the IP itself is interesting, there's a chance that it's going to bring new people in, and that's sort of something that Nintendo's talked about in the past. I did a video a while ago that's no longer up, but it was about Nintendo sort of considering itself an entertainment company more than it is a video game company at this point. And the idea is that between the theme parks and the movies and the games, they want to provide people as much opportunity as possible to have that first interaction with their IP. And I think that the movies, while they're not necessarily going to sell to the extent that they're like each one is $100 million or whatever, like some crazy blockbuster, I think that it creates the possibility for growth because let's say the Metroid movie comes out, right? And the Metroid movie is like crazy good. Like they got the ambiance right, they got all of this right, and just it's widely acclaimed as like a killer sci-fi movie. People who have never played the games before might go to the movie because it's $10 and only takes them 2 hours versus it's $60 and it's widely considered to be an incredibly difficult game, and just suddenly be like, oh shit, like that's a crazy universe, I want to know everything about it. And so now they're like busting out the NES and like starting from there, right? Like
Yeah, I love it.
there's a
I
path
agree.
there, and I think that it's
There's a path there. I agree.
yeah, and so I just think it's an exciting thing to see. I think to the point of the multi-universe thing, I think that's sort of a down the road thought, but it's something that just interests me as
Oh yeah.
as an idea because I think that it could be so big. It's just like we've been talking about. It all comes down to the execution, and I think
Uh,
your concerns about the market are fair though. They're very
no,
right.
it's good, excellent, fun conversation, which is exactly what I'm here for. And I'm running out of things to say about it, but I will say I do know a little bit about movies. You were talking about the 20 million copies of Dread sold, right? If that's accurate, and every single person that bought a copy goes to the movies, that's 200 million that they make before they have to pay anybody anything. And on average, a movie costs about $65 million to make, but obviously more, a lot of CGI, bigger budget. Like movies have bigger budgets, right? But I will run down what the box office numbers have been for the past few weeks because I do keep track of this every once in a while because I used to be super into like I would listen to like movie podcasts and stuff. So I do kind of check in on the box office every once in a while. If in its first weekend the movie you were talking about made $35 million, right?
Hmm.
So if Nintendo's movie cost 65 million to make, they wouldn't have made their money back, but that's a pretty substantial amount of the budget, right? And some other big hitters that have been in theaters for a while. Kingdom of Planet of the Apes has been in theaters for 2 weeks now, and it's made $101 million. This weekend, it made 26 million. Challengers has been in theaters for a month. It's only made $44 million, and this weekend it only made 2.9 million.
That's so
Right?
interesting. And so then I guess then what is the I would be so curious what the conversion rate of game sales to movie tickets are because it seems to me like with those numbers in mind, then it's almost like a good bet to put a Metroid. You know what I mean? Like if you're selling 20 million games for 60
Yeah.
bucks, like I don't know what that conversion rate is, but it feels like even if, like if you're making $35 million on if, right? If you sell, if you sell like 5 million tickets and each ticket's, $10, $12, like doesn't that
Here's
math out? But that's
It
also
maps out if everyone that bought the game goes to see the movie when it comes out. You also have to remember, like, life happens, and movies in a theater are like a very
right.
point in time thing. And just like the games that continue to exist after they're released and continue to make money and continue to grow in the zeitgeist and the pop culture, these movies will be out there on streaming services and whatever. But I don't know enough about the in-depth detailed numbers to say, does the movie have to make back, like, generally, if the movie doesn't make back its budget or more while it's in theaters, it's considered to be not good, right? So
Mhm.
Challengers probably cost more than $44 million to make, so that's probably going to go down as like a flop, right? And so the question you have to ask yourself is, are all 20,000 of the people that bought a copy of Metroid Dread going to go see that movie in the first 2 or 3 weeks that it comes out, right? Because once you get past that second or third week, you really drop. Like, you still will make millions for certain, because people will do exactly what you said. They'll be like, "Oh, I'll go check this out." But movie ticket sales are like super duper momentum based, and unlike other media, it's like super word of mouth and in the moment. Like, the more people are talking about your movie when it comes out, the more other people are going to want to go see it. And so Nintendo would really have to hit the ground running and make sure that they marketed it well, and they would have to get like a certain inertia to behind this film, because it's hard out there for some of these movies. I think Challengers, I saw tons of marketing for Challengers, and it has barely made any money. Godzilla versus Kong has been in theaters for 2 months, and it's made $194 million, but that still isn't the 200 million that Nintendo would stand to make if every person that bought a copy of Metroid Dread went and saw the movie.
Right.
Right. So obviously the math doesn't math out like perfectly, right? Because
No.
Godzilla versus
Well,
Kong was also a pretty big movie, and it's not even going to make 200 million probably.
and that's the thing, right? Is I don't think there's no situation in which all 20 million people who bought the game go see the movie, and certainly not in the theatrical release. That's just not, people are still
Right.
buying Metroid Dread, right? But I
Right.
think, the sort of the thought process is even if, 5 million of those people get out and see it, right? That sort of is not probably the whole budget. And it also depends on how much they spend on it. It depends
Yeah.
on a number of
There's
things.
so
But I guess
many factors.
my thought is just that there's sort of that base of interest, right? There's that inherent audience that's sort of built in that they're dealing with, where other movies, just like I'm sure there's a huge Godzilla versus King Kong audience of people who are invested in it and that sort of thing. But that's a big blockbuster movie. But when the point I was making was essentially that, like, if it's something that's like a new IP, but that movie presumably was, if it was worth making to somebody, right? Whether or not it makes its money back is neither here. I think
Number one
that's
movie this weekend. My kids went
yeah.
and saw it, so like there's obviously interest in it.
Yeah, and so I think there's like my question or sort of my wonder is when you do the numbers out, even for like even if we were to look into like a Star Fox or something, right? Which I don't know that you can make a Star Fox movie without it just being a Star Wars ripoff, because that's essentially what Star Fox is. But I think that, like, if you were to just sort of distill it into two people, right? You have the base viewers who are just fans of the Nintendo IP, and then the people who are going to turn out for that reason, right? And then you also have the sort of people who will organically discover it or resonate with the story but not know much about the video game side. I wonder if that's enough. And we won't really know until they do it, but it relies on Nintendo, like we've talked about, delivering and doing the right thing and knocking the movie thing out of the park.
I'll be curious to see how Legend of Zelda does, because I think we could revisit this conversation after that comes out and have a much better idea of like where we stand.
I think so. I mean, my gut is just it's going to be huge. But it's if here's the problem though. Here's the key moment we will know, Radmeyer, is when they release the first like trailer for it. If people disagree with the casting, that's one thing, because we obviously did it with the Mario movie and that didn't matter. But like, if we have like an ugly Sonic moment for a live action Legend of Zelda, I think they're cooked. I think that kills it. It's like if they, if they're like Tom Holland is Link, right? Like it's done. It's over. And so I don't know. I'm very curious. I think it's super exciting because I want to believe, right? I want to believe that we're gonna get some killer movies here. I would love I would love an extended Nintendo universe, but I just don't know if we're gonna. I don't know. I think you raise a lot of good points, and we're just gonna have to see how it plays out. But it's interesting to talk about, and I hope it's at least a little interesting to listen to. And we're coming up close to an hour, so I've just got one last thing. Did you have any last thoughts on this? I know you said we were kind of running out of steam.
No. I made my final point. I love that conversation, though. That's my wheelhouse. I'm all about that.
That was, I think, everything we had for today. We're just over an hour, which I think is right. And so let's close this bad boy out. Do we want a 3, 2, 1 Nintendo alert it?
We are absolutely gonna fuck this up. I know we did great the first time.
No, we're gonna be 2 for 2 here.
Nintendo
Alert. And that's the end of the podcast.